Okay, guys, so I'm at... Why does it still say trolls? I'm not happy about that. Anyway. I don't know how to change it. Hello? I can't hear my voice. And I don't know why it says trolls. But either way. Good evening, guys. I am about to start my book. And I just wanted to read it for everybody. Because it's interesting. I've never seen this book before. And I found it ironic. I like a little... I don't know. It's probably going to put me sideways. But I just want to make sure I can hear myself. Or not hear myself. But I want to make sure I can be heard. And usually when the microphone's down, I can be. Let's see. Okay. The Mis-Education of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. I'm at work, y'all. I think they bothering me. This is the first page? Yes, they are bothering me. Yes, how can I help you? Yes. Extra toothbrushes? No. Maybe. Hold on, let me see. They just got the little tiny toothpaste, but they don't have the toothpaste. There is a BP, like as soon as you come off this corner, and they're open still for the, I think for 24 hours, so they should have one. You're welcome. I'm back. I work in hospitality, guys, so forgive me for the breaks anytime I have to get up. And let me make sure I plug my charger back in as well, so we don't die on you guys. Ooh. Oh, hey, Uncle Neff Show. Hey, Ann. Thank you guys for joining. I'm just reading, so it might get a little boring, but there's a lot about the education system and the way they treat melanated people that I don't appreciate. So when I saw this book, I decided to pick it up, see if I can educate myself a little bit. It was produced by the Africa World Press Incorporation, first published by the Associated Publishers, and a portion of all net sales of the AWP edition will be donated to the Association of African American Life and History, founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson and still working to realize his vision. Forward. The thoughts brought together in this volume have been expressed in recent addresses and articles written by the author. From time to time, persons deeply interested in the point of view therein presented have requested that these comments on education be made available. The King's a Crabtree. We don't at the moment. I do apologize. Okay. Alrighty, have a blessed evening. The universe don't want me to be great, y'all. I have not been busy all day, and all of a sudden when I'm trying to read The Mis-Education of the Negro, we want to get busy. Spiritual warfare is real. And people definitely do try it. I'm only putting it up here because I'm tired of this little thingy popping up. But I'm not really one of those content creators that actually cares about all of those things. I just like to inform the public. Hello, Sally. It's been a while. In the preparation of the volume, the author has not followed in detail the productions upon which most of the book is based. The aim is to set forth only the thought developed in passing from the one to the other. The language in some cases then is entirely new, and the work is not a collection of essays. In this way, repetition has been avoided, except to emphasize the thesis which the author sustains. That was in Washington, D.C. of January 1933. So this is a pretty old book. Nothing. I'm just reading the Mis-Education of the Negro. It's a book I found while I was thrift shopping. I was donating some clothes to one of these little thrift stores, and I saw this book, and I decided to pick it up. Now, here's our preface. Herein are recorded not opinions, but the reflections of one who for 40 years has participated in the education of the black, brown, yellow, and white races in both hemispheres and in tropical and temperate regions. Such experience, too, has been with students in all grades from the kindergarten to the university. The author, moreover, has traveled around the world to observe not only modern school systems in various countries, but to study the special systems set up by private agencies and governments to educate the natives in their colonies and dependencies. Some of these observations, too, have been checked against more recent studies on a later tour. Discussing herein the mistakes made in the education of the Negro, the writer frankly admits that he has committed some of these errors himself. In several chapters, moreover, he specifically points out wherein he himself has strayed from the path of wisdom. This book, then, is not intended as a broadside against any particular person or class, but it is given as a corrective for methods which have not produced satisfactory results. The author does not support the once popular view. What is it telling me to do? The author does not support the once popular view that in matters of education, Negroes are rightfully subjected to the will of others on the presumption that these poor people are not large taxpayers and must be content with charitable contributions to their uplift. The author takes the position that the consumer pays the tax, and as such, every individual of the social order should be given unlimited opportunity to make the most of himself. Such opportunity, too, should not be determined from without by forces set to direct the prescribed element in a way to redound solely to the good of others, but should be determined by the makeup of the Negro himself and by what his environment requires of him. This new program of uplift, the author contends, should not be decided upon by the trial and error method in the application of devices used in dealing with others in a different situation and at another epoch. Only by careful study of the Negro himself and the life which he is forced to lead can we arrive at the proper procedure in this crisis. The mere imparting of information is not education. Above all things, the effort must result in making a man think and do for himself, just as the Jews have done in spite of universal persecution. In thus estimating the results obtained from the so-called education of the Negro, the author does not go to the census figures to show the progress of the race. It may be of no importance to the race to be able to boast today of how many times as many educated members as it had in 1865. If there are of the wrong kind, the increase in numbers will be a disadvantage rather than an advantage. The only question which concerns us here is whether the educated persons are actually equipped to face the ordeal before them or unconsciously contribute to their own undoing by perpetuating the regime of the oppressor. Herein, however, lies no argument for the oft-heard contention that education for the white man should mean one thing and for the Negro a different thing. The element of race does not enter here. It is merely a matter of exercising common sense and approaching people through their environment in order to deal with conditions as they are rather than as you would like to see them or imagine that they are. There may be a difference in method of attack, but the principle remains the same. Highly educated Negroes denounce persons who advocate for the Negro, a sort of education different in some respects from that now given the white man. Negroes who have been so long inconvenienced and denied opportunities for development are naturally afraid of anything that sounds like discrimination. They are anxious to have everything the white man has, even if it is harmful. The possibility of originality in the Negro, therefore, is discounted 100% to maintain a nominal equality. If the whites decide to take up Mormonism The Negroes must follow their lead. If the whites neglect such a study, then the Negroes must do likewise. The author, however, does not have such an attitude. He considers the educational system as it has developed both in Europe and America an antiquated process, which does not hit the mark even in the case of the needs of the white man himself. If the white man wants to hold on to it, let him do so. But the Negro, listen carefully here, but the Negro, so far as he is able, should develop and carry out a program of his own. The so-called modern education, with all its defects, however, does others so much more good than it does the Negro, because it has been worked out in conformity to the needs of those who have enslaved and oppressed weaker peoples. For example, the philosophy and ethics resulting from our educational system have justified slavery, peonage, segregation, and lynching. The oppressor has the right to exploit, to handicap, and to kill the oppressed. Negroes, daily educated in the tenets of such a religion of the strong, have accepted the status of the weak as divinely ordained. And during the last 3 generations of their nominal freedom, they have done practically nothing to change it. Their pouting and resolutions indulged in by a few of the race have been of little avail. No systematic effort towards change has been possible for taught the same economics. History, philosophy, literature, and religion, which have established the present code of morals, the Negro's mind have been brought under the control of his oppressor. Let me read that one more time. No systematic effort taught toward change has been possible, for taught the same economics, the same history, the same philosophy, the same literature, and the same religion, which have established the present code of morals, the Negro's mind have been brought under the control of his oppressor. They use school, they use economics, they use history, they use philosophy, they use literature, and most of all, which everybody seems sensitive to, they use religion. Because religion is a man-made thing. Remember that. The problem of holding the Negro down, therefore, is easily solved. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. The same educational process which inspires and stimulates the oppressor with the thought that he is everything and has accomplished everything worthwhile, depresses and crushes at the same time the spark of genius in the Negro by making him feel that his race does not amount to much and never will measure up to the standards of other peoples. The Negro, thus educated, is a hopeless liability of the race. The difficulty is that the educated Negro is compelled to live and move among his own people whom he has been taught to despise. As a rule, therefore, the educated Negro prefers to buy his fruit from a white grocer because he has been taught that the Negro is not clean. It does not matter how often a Negro washes his hands, then he cannot clean them. And it does not matter how often a white man uses his hands, he cannot soil them. The educated Negro, moreover, is disinclined to take part in Negro business because he has been taught in economics that Negroes cannot operate in this particular sphere. The educated Negro gets less and less pleasure out of the Negro church, not on account of its primitiveness and increasive corruption, but because of his preference for the seats of righteousness controlled by his oppressor. This has been his education, and nothing else has been expected of him. If the educated Negro could go off and be white, he might be happy, but only a mulatto now and then can do this. The large majority of this class then must go through life denouncing white people because they are trying to run away from the blacks and decrying the blacks because they are not white. That last part is basically about mixed babies. And now to chapter 1, the seed of trouble. The educated Negroes have the attitude of content toward their own people because in their own as well as in their mixed schools, Negroes are taught to admire the Hebrew, the Greek, the Latin, and the Teuton as to despise the African. Of the hundreds of Negro high schools recently examined by an expert in the United States Bureau of Education, only 18 offer a course taking up the history of Negro, and most of the Negro colleges and universities where the Negro is thought of, the race is studied only as a problem or dismissed as of little consequence. For example, an officer of a Negro university, thinking that an additional course on the Negro should be given there, called upon a Negro doctor of philosophy of the faculty to offer such work. He promptly informed the officer that he knew nothing about the Negro. He did not go to school to waste his time that way. He went to be educated in a system which dismisses the Negro as a non-entity. At a Negro summer school 2 years ago, a white instructor gave a course on the Negro, using for his text a work which teaches that whites are superior to blacks. And here I am being bothered again. 1 second. Hey, babe, how can I help you?
Hey, it's not me. I swear to God, it ain't me.
No. I told you, this system is just jank.
Okay.
What's the room number one more time?
408.
408? Okay. Yeah, that's why anytime they stop working, I just started throwing them away. So it's forcing them to use the newer cards. Alrighty. Hope you have a blessed evening. Alrighty. 1 second. Let me sit back down, get comfortable and things. I feel like that teacher that gets interrupted by the rowdy kids in class. Okay, where was I? I'm going to start that paragraph over since I was interrupted. At a Negro summer school 2 years ago, a white instructor gave a course on the Negro using for his text a work which teaches that whites are superior to the blacks. When asked by one of the students why he used such a textbook, the instructor replied that he wanted them to get that point of view. Even schools for Negroes, then, are places where they must be convinced of their inferiority. The thought of the inferiority of the Negro is drilled into him in almost every class he enters and in almost every book he studies. If he happens to leave school after he masters the fundamentals before he finishes high school or reaches college, he will naturally escape some of this bias and may recover in time to be of service to his people. Practically, all of the successful Negroes in this country are of the uneducated type, or of that of Negroes who have had no formal education at all. The large majority of the Negroes who have been put on the finishing touches of our best colleges are all but worthless in the development of their people. If after leaving school they have the opportunity to give out to Negroes what traducers of the race would like to have it, forgive me for any mispronunciation of words, to have it, learn such persons may thereby earn a living at teaching or preaching what they have been taught, but they never become a constructive force in the development of the race. The so-called school then becomes a questionable factor in the life of this despised people. As another has well said, to handicap a student by teaching him that his black face is a curse and that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless is the worst sort of lynching. Let me read that one more time. To handicap a student by teaching him that his black face is a curse, that his struggle to change his condition is hopeless, is the worst sort of lynching. It kills one's aspiration and dooms him to vagabondage and crime. It is strange, then, that the friends of the truth and the promoters of freedom have not risen up against the present propaganda in the schools and crushed it. This crusade is much more important than the anti-lynching movement, because there would be no lynching if it did not start in the schoolroom. Why not exploit, enslave, or exterminate a class that everybody is taught to regard as inferior? To be more explicit, we may go to the seat of the trouble. Our most widely known scholars have been trained in universities outside of the South, Northern and Western institutions, however, have had no time to deal with matters which concern the Negro especially. They must direct their attention to the problems of the majority of the constituents, and too often they have stimulated their prejudices by referring to the Negro as unworthy of consideration. Most of what these universities have offered as language, mathematics, and science may have served a good purpose, but much of what they have taught as economics, history, literature, religion, and philosophy is propaganda and can't that involved a waste of time and misdirected the Negroes thus trained. I'm going to read that one more time. Most of what these universities have offered as language, mathematics, and science may have served a good purpose, but much of what they have taught as economics, history, literature, religion, and philosophy is propaganda and cant that involve a waste of time and misdirected the Negroes thus trained. And even in the certitude of science or mathematics, it has been unfortunate that the approach to the Negro has been borrowed from a foreign method. For example, the teaching of arithmetic in the 5th grade in a backward county in Mississippi should mean one thing in the Negro school and a decidedly different thing in the white school. The Negro children, as a rule, come from the homes of tenants and peons who have to migrate annually from plantation to plantation looking for light which they have never seen. The children from the homes of the white planters and merchants live permanently in the midst of calculations, family budgets, and the like, which enable them sometimes to learn more by contact than the Negro can acquire in school. Instead of teaching such Negro children less arithmetic, they should be taught much more of it than the white children, for the latter attended a graded school consolidated by free transportation, when the Negroes go to one room, rented hovels, to be taught without equipment and be incompetent teachers. 1 second. Yes, how can I help you?
Yes, I have a reservation.
Okay, what's the name and can I have your ID, please? Thank you for the follow. I do apologize for the inconvenience, but it looks like your reservation is amongst one of the other 8 that came too late. I'm sorry, baby. They keep overbooking us, but I put it in a shift recap last night, and the owner responded this morning that they are going to try and get the websites to start blocking it whenever we're fully booked, so y'all don't have to go through this inconvenience.
Oh, it's booked?
Yes, ma'am. Like, when I go to try and assign the room, we don't have any available.
So I can't check in.
I'm sorry, baby. I hope you have a blessed evening. Okay, sorry. This place is ghetto. But give me 1 second. I gotta do this cancellation for her free of charge, so they don't try and take her money. Hey, baby, how you doing? Oh, man. I gotta cancel like 7 reservations. But back to my book. Alrighty, where was I at? The children from the homes of white planters and merchants live permanently in the midst of calculations, family budgets, and the like, which enable them sometimes to learn more by contact than the Negro can acquire in school. Instead of teaching such Negro children less arithmetic, they should be taught much more of it than the white children, for the latter attended a greater school consolidated by free transportation when the Negroes go to one-room rented hovels to be taught without equipment, and by incompetent teachers educated scarcely beyond the 8th grade. Dang. In the schools of theology, Negroes are taught the interpretation of the Bible worked out by those who have justified segregation and winked at the economic debasement of the Negro. Sometimes, and while we on top of that, has the Bible ever been, like, rewritten? You know? Like the very, very first King James Version, like, has that ever been rewritten? And I'm not talking about just the international and all of those versions. I'm talking about the actual facts of what they've put in the Bible. But back to this. In schools of theology, Negroes are taught the interpretation of the Bible worked out by those who have justified segregation and winked at the economic debasement of the Negro, sometimes almost to the point of starvation. Deriving their sense of right from this teaching, graduates of such schools can have no message to grip the people whom they have been ill trained to serve. Most of such miseducated ministers, therefore, preach to benches, while illiterate Negro preachers do the best they can in supplying the spiritual needs of the masses. In the schools of business administration, Negroes are trained exclusively in the psychology and economics of Wall Street and are therefore made to despise the opportunities to run ice wagons, push banana carts, and sell peanuts among their own people. Foreigners who have not studied economics but have studied Negroes take up this business and grow rich. In schools of journalism, Negroes are being taught how to edit such metropolitan dailies as the Chicago Tribune and the New York Times, which would hardly hire a Negro as a janitor. And when these graduates come to the Negro weeklies for employment, they are not prepared to function in such establishments, which, to be successful, must be built upon accurate knowledge of the psychology and philosophy of the Negro. When a Negro has finished his education in our schools, then he has been equipped to begin the life of Americanized or Europeanized white man. But before he steps from the threshold of his alma mater, he is told by his teachers that he must go back to his own people. Ooh, what did they say? How can I help you? I always give a new one because most of the time it's the fact that the keys are old. So I'd rather give you a new one than risk you coming back. You see how these aren't working? That's because most of these keys are old.
They're not working?
Here you go. You already know how it be.
I'm telling you. What the hell am I supposed to do?
Because I'm trying to educate people and read, on live, but I keep getting interrupted.
What you doing? What you talking about? If you don't already have a reservation, not at the moment, because we are fully booked. Yeah. My pleasure. Have a blessed evening. What you educating
On the Mis-Education of the Negro.
Oh, yeah. A lot of motherfuckers don't even know their origins.
I'm telling you, and it's ironic because I found this book in a thrift store one day. And I got triggered at first because I'm like, okay, what they trying to say? But then I looked and I read the first page and I'm like, oh, okay, it's hitting on something and it's written by a black man.
You know everybody wanted slaves, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of shit I could goddamn touch bases on. You don't even need a book. See, that's what I do. I go around. It's actually me and a group of people.
Really?
Yeah, we go around and talk to colleges, churches, and a lot of shit like that, like with the real information.
Okay.
Like dealing with ego supply, religion. Like, man, it's so much, even down to the Black Santa Claus, you feel me?
Do you have a social media or anything, like a business card or something that we can promote?
Shit, I do. I got I had to read funk. Damn, shit. Matter of fact, when you text me, I'm gonna send you all my links.
Okay, bet.
Alright.
Woo-wee! You heard it here first, folks. We now have a partner. I've got somebody who will also help educate. Whatever we come across, we will share with you guys. Oh, hey, Slinky's World. Hey, Dev. It's been a while. Miss you always, buddy, even if I can't have evidential fact of that. Crazy. The way this world is. Some women can't have friends, you know? Anyway. But let's start back with that other sentence. When a Negro has finished his education in our schools, then he has been equipped to begin the life of an Americanized or Europeanized white man. But before he steps from the threshold of his alma mater, he is told by his teachers that he must go back to his own people from whom he has been estranged by a vision of ideals, which in his disillusionment, he will realize that he cannot attain. He goes forth to play his part in life, but he must be both social and bisocial at the same time. While he is a part of the body politic, he is, in addition to this, a member of a particular race to which he must restrict himself in all matters social. While serving his country, he must serve within a special group. While being a good American, he must above all things be a good Negro. And to perform this definite function, he must learn to stay in a Negro's place. And that's literally what the book is saying. If you can read backwards, that's literally what the book is saying. It's crazy. For the arduous task of serving a race thus handicapped, however, the Negro graduate has had little or no training at all. The people whom he has been ordered to serve have been belittled by his teachers to the extent that he can hardly find delight in undertaking what his education has led him to think is impossible. Considering his race as blank in achievement, then he sets out to stimulate their imitation of others. The performance is kept up a while, but like any other effort at meaningless imitation, it results in failure. Facing this undesirable result, the highly educated Negro often grows sour. He becomes too pessimistic to be a constructive force and usually develops into a chronic fault finder or a complainant at the bar of public opinion. Often when he sees that the fault lies at the door of the white oppressor whom he is afraid to attack, he turns upon pioneering Negro, who is at work doing the best he can to extricate himself from an uncomfortable predicament. And this effort to imitate, however... Amen. Love always. Have a blessed evening. And this effort to imitate, however, that these educated people are insincere. They hope to make the Negro conform quickly to the standard of the whites and thus remove the pretext for the barriers between the races. They do not realize, however, that even if the Negroes do successfully imitate the whites, nothing new has therefore been accomplished. You simply have a larger number of persons doing what others have been doing. The unusual gifts of the race have not thereby been developed, and an unwilling world therefore continues to wonder what the Negro is good for. These educated people, however, decry any such thing as race consciousness, and in some respects they are right. They do not like to hear such expressions as Negro literature, Negro poetry, African art, or thinking black. And roughly speaking, we must concede that such things do not exist. These things did not figure in the courses which they are pursued in school. And why should they? Aren't we all Americans? Then whatever is American is as much the heritage of the Negro as of any group in this country. The highly educated contend, moreover, that when the Negro emphasizes these things, he invites racial discrimination by recognizing such differentness of the races. The thought that the Negro is one thing and the white man another is the stock and trade argument of the Caucasian to justify segregation. Why, then, should the Negro blame the white man for doing what he himself does? These highly educated Negroes, however, fail to see that it is not the Negro who takes this position. The white man forces him to it, and to extricate himself, therefore, the Negro leader must so deal with the situation as to develop in the segregated group the power which they can elevate themselves. The differentness of races, moreover, is no evidence of superiority or inferiority. This merely indicates that each race has certain gifts which the others do not possess. It is by the development of these gifts that every race must justify its right to exist. Chapter 2. How we missed the mark. How we have arrived at the present state of affairs can be understood only by studying the forces effective in the development of Negro education, since it was systematically undertaken immediately after emancipation. So, crazy. To point out merely the defects as they appear today will be of little benefit to the present and future generations. These things must be viewed in their historic setting. The conditions of today have been determined by what has taken place in the past, and in a careful study of this history, we may see more clearly the theater. Oh, I don't know how my phone is not charging. Alright, guess it's not going to charge. These things must be viewed in their historic setting. The conditions of today have been determined by what has taken place in the past, and in a careful study of this history, we may see more clearly that the great theater of events in which the Negro has played a part. We may understand better what his role has been and how well he has functioned in it. The idea of educating the Negroes after the Civil War was largely a prompting of philanthropy. Their white neighbors failed to assume their responsibilities. These black people had been liberated as a result of a sectional conflict out of which their former owners had emerged as victims. From this class, then, the freedmen could not expect much sympathy or cooperation in the effort to prepare themselves to figure as citizens of a modern republic. From functionaries of the United States government itself and from those who participated in the conquest of the secessionists early came the plan of teaching these freedmen the simple duties of life as worked out by the Freedmen's Bureau and philanthropic agencies. When systemized, this effort became a program for the organization of churches and schools in the direction of them along lines which had been considered most conducive to the progress of people otherwise circumstanced. Wow, so they systematically used the government to implement oppression, and they did a damn good job because it still lies in today. Anyway, here and there some variation was made in this program in view of the fact that the status of the freedmen in no way paralleled that of their friends and teachers, but such thought was not in general. When the Negroes in some way would learn to perform the duties with other elements of the population had prepared themselves to discharge, they would be duly qualified. It was believed that to function as citizens of the country. Inasmuch as most Negroes lived in the agricultural South, moreover, and only a few of them at first acquired small farms, there was little in their life which anyone of thought could not have easily understood. Which anyone of thought could not have easily understood. The poverty which afflicted them for a generation after emancipation held them down to the lowest order of society. Nominally free but economically enslaved, the participation of the freedmen in government for a few years during the period known as the Reconstruction had little bearing on their situation, except that they did join with the uneducated poor whites in bringing about certain much desired social reforms, especially in giving the South its first plan of democratic education and providing for a school system at public expense. Neither this inadequately supported school system nor the struggling higher institutions of a class order established about the same time, however, connected the Negroes very closely with life as it was. These institutions were concerned rather with life as they hoped to make it. When the Negro found himself deprived of influence in politics, therefore, and at the same time unprepared to participate in the higher functions and the industrial development which this country began to undergo, it soon became evident to him that he was losing ground in the basic things of life. He was spending his time studying about the things which had been or might be, but he was learning little to help him to do better the task at hand. Since the Negroes believed that the causes of this untoward condition lay without the race, migration was attempted, and immigration to Africa was again urged. At this psychological moment came the wave of industrial education which swept the country by storm. The educational authorities in the cities and states throughout the Black Belt began to change the course of study to make the training of the Negro conform to this policy. The missionary teachers from the North which is actually really crazy, y'all, that they're trying to say they pushed oppression in education so bad that we feel the need to go outside of America to learn our history and our culture. That is sad, because I've literally, like, for the past 2.5-3 months of wanting to learn more about what is the African American, Native American, melanated culture, I've realized I have to go back to Egypt, to Africa. We have to go back to, these highly melanated places where the motherland actually originated and find the unbiased teachings. Because even this book from 1933 is telling you teachings were biased. But back to where I was at. The missionary teachers from the North, in defense of their idea of more liberal training, however, fearlessly attacked this new educational policy, and the Negroes participating in the same dispute arrayed themselves respectively on one side or the other. For a generation thereafter, the quarrel as to whether the Negro should be given a classical or a practical education was the dominant topic in Negro schools and churches throughout the United States. Labor was the most important thing in life, it was argued. Practical education counted in reaching that end, and the Negro worker must be taught to solve this problem of efficiency before directing attention to other things. So there it's saying we were taught, it was literally embedded in us from slavery times to work above all else. And that's not how it's supposed to be. How does our spirit rest if we're doing more work than relaxation or learning? Others, more narrow-minded than the advocates of industrial education, seized upon the idea, feeling that although the Negro must have some semblance of education, it would be a fine stroke to be able to make a distinction between the training given the Negro and that provided for the whites. Inasmuch as the industrial education, idea rapidly gained ground too, many Negroes for political purposes began to espouse it. And schools and colleges, hoping thereby to obtain money, worked out accordingly makeshift provisions for such instruction. Looking to Crabtree. Okay, what's his name gonna be? Yes, sir. But I need to know his name so I can make sure it's the right person that's checking in under your name. Okay. And is he gonna be like? Okay, and while we've got you on the phone, is he gonna be paying for the room himself, or are we gonna be using the card on file? Oh, okay. Well, then, whenever he gets here, I will make sure that he is well taken care of and gets to his room comfortably. Yes, sir. I am very grateful. You too. Have a blessed evening. All right. Bye-bye. Ooh. Alrighty. Yay, it's finally charging my phone again. Alright, where was I at? Boom. Labor was the most important thing of life. It was argued practical education counted in reaching that end, and the Negro worker must be taught to solve this problem of efficiency before directing attention to other things. Ooh, it's almost time for me to get off, y'all, and I didn't even know it. But also, I'm just now realizing this only like 12 pages. It's taking me an hour to read 12 pages. That's ridiculous. Others, more narrow-minded than the advocates of... No! I'll be right back. Hey, how you doing? What you need? Band-Aids? Okay. Of course. Yeah, I'll give you a few of them. I just want to make sure we had it. Oh, dang. They got a whole big little army first aid kit back there. Not in this one, but let me go back and grab it from that one.
You can leave it right there.
What elevator?
Let's see. Thank you so much. When you leave, let's see it.
That part. Ointment. I got you. One second, guys. Helping a guest.
Only took two.
Okay.
2 maybe. I do this work all the time. I don't have to pay for no Band-Aid for the next 6 months.
That part. Look, that's how I be. That's how I got a Band-Aid in my house. What's up? Hold on, wait, hold on. Oh, Jesus.
Once it, he's got to make
How more time?
a whole box.
A whole box? Hold on. Please don't. Look. I give you 4. Please don't come back 5 more times. I'm gonna cry. You know I'm back here trying to... Well, because you said he said... Anything like that, but I didn't say anything. Ain't nobody Oh my God. I'm back, y'all. If y'all could hear the stuff this man be saying, these guests be reckless sometimes. Feel a little. But anyway. Others, more narrow-minded than the advocates of what is that? Of industrial education, seized upon the idea, feeling that although the Negro must have some semblance of education, it would be a fine stroke to be able to make a distinction between the training given the Negro and that provided for the whites. Inasmuch as the industrial education idea rapidly gained ground too, many Negroes for political purposes began to espouse it, and schools and colleges, hoping thereby to obtain money worked out accordingly, makeshift provisions for such instruction, although they could not satisfactorily offer it. A few real industrial schools actually equipped themselves for this work and turned out a number of graduates with such preparation. Unfortunately, however, the affair developed into a sort of battle of words, for in spite all of that they said and did, the majority of the Negroes, those who did make some effort to obtain an education, did not actually receive either an industrial or the classical education. Negroes attended industrial schools, took such training as were prescribed, and received their diplomas, but few of them developed adequate efficiency to be able to do what they were supposedly trained to do. The schools in which they were educated could not provide for all the experience with machinery which white apprentices trained in factories had. Such industrial education as these Negroes received then was merely to master a technique already discarded in progressive centers. And even in less complicated operations of industry, these schools had no such facilities as to parallel the numerous processes of factories conducted on the plan of the division of labor. Except what value such training might have in the development of the mind by making practical applications of mathematics and science, then it was a failure. The majority of Negro graduates of industrial schools, therefore, have gone into other avenues, and too often into those for which they have had no preparation whatever. Some people who actually prepared for the industrial sphere by self-improvement, likewise, sought other occupations from the reasons that Negroes were generally barred from higher pursuits by trade unions. And being unable to develop captains of industry to increase the demand for persons in these lines, the Negroes have not opened up many such opportunities for themselves. During these years, too, the schools for the classical educations for Negroes have not done any better. They have proceeded on the basis that every ambitious person needs a liberal education, when, as a matter of fact, this does not necessarily follow. The Negro trained in the advanced phases of literature, philosophy, and politics have been unable to develop far in using his knowledge because of having to function in the lower spheres of the social order. Advanced knowledge of science, mathematics, and languages, moreover, has not been much more useful except for mental discipline because of the dearth of opportunity to apply such knowledge among people who were largely common laborers in towns or peons on the plantations. The extent to which such higher education has been successful in leading the Negro to think, which above all is the chief purpose of education, has merely made him more of a malcontent when he can sense the drift of things and appreciate the impossibility of success, envisioning conditions as they really are. It is very clear, therefore, that we do not have in the life of the Negro today a large number of persons who have been benefited by either of the systems about which we have quarreled so long. The number of Negro mechanics and artisans have comparatively declined during the last 2 generations. The Negroes do not proportionately represent as many skilled laborers as they did before the Civil War. If the practical education which the Negroes received helped to improve the situation so that it is today no worse than what it is, certainly, it did not solve the problem as was expected of it. On the other hand, in spite of much classical education of the Negroes, we do not find in the race a large supply of thinkers and philosophers. One excuse is that the scholarship among Negroes has been vitiated by the necessity of all of them to combat segregation and fight to retain standing ground in the struggle of races. Comparatively, few American Negroes have produced credible literature, and still fewer have made any large contribution to the philosophy or science. They have not risen to the heights of black men further removed from the influence of slavery and segregation. For this reason, we do not find among American Negroes a Pushkin, a Gomez, a Joffrey, a Captain, or a Dumas. Even men like Roland Hayes or Henry O. Tanner have risen to the higher levels by getting out of this country to relieve themselves of our stifling traditions and to recover from their education. It is sad when you have to go away from America to unlearn everything that they have improperly and intentionally mistaught us. It's really sad. You got to go out of the way. How we had drifted away from the truth. How then did the education of the Negro take such a trend? The people who maintained schools for the education of certain Negroes before the Civil War were certainly sincere, and so were the missionary workers who went south to enlighten the freedmen after the results of that conflict had given the Negroes a new status. These earnest workers, however, had more enthusiasm than knowledge. They did not understand the task before them. This undertaking, too, was more of an effort towards social uplift than actual education. Their aim was to transform the Negroes, not to develop them. The freedmen who were to be enlightened were given little thought, for the best friends of the race, ill-taught themselves, followed the traditional curricula of the times which did not take the Negro into consideration except to condemn or pity him. In geography, the races were described in conformity with the program of the usual propaganda to engender in whites a race hate of the Negro, and in the Negroes contempt for themselves. A poet of distinction was selected to illustrate the physical features of the white race. A bedecked chief of a tribe, those of the red, a proud warrior, the brown, a prince of the yellow, and a savage with a ring in his nose, the black. The Negro, of course, stood at the foot of the social ladder. The description of the various parts of the world has worked out according to the same plan. The parts inhabited by the Caucasian were treated in detail. Less attention was given to the yellow people, still less to the red, very less to the brown, and practically none to the black race. Those people who are far removed from the physical characteristics of the Caucasians or who do not materially assist them in the domination or exploitation of others were not mentioned except to be belittled or decried. From the teaching of science, the Negro was likewise eliminated. The beginnings of science in various parts of the Orient were mentioned, but the African's early advancement in this field was omitted. I think people are up there talking. Students who were not told that people are just talking, who were not told that ancient Africans of the interior knew sufficient science to concoct poisons for arrowheads, to mix durable colors for paintings, to extract metals from nature and refine them for development in the industrial arts. Very little was said about the chemistry and the method of Egyptian embalming. I'm talking about embalming. It's embalming. Special needs. There we go. Very little was said about the chemistry and the method of Egyptian embalming, which was the product of the mixed breeds of northern Africa, now known in the modern world as colored people. In the study of language, in school pupils were made to scoff at the Negro dialect, as some peculiar possession of the Negro which they should despise, rather than directed to the study the background of the language as a broken down African tongue. In short, to understand their own linguistic history, which is certainly more important for them than the study of French, phonetics, or historical Spanish grammar. To the African language as such no attention was given, except in case of the preparation of traders, missionaries, and public functionaries to exploit the natives. This number of persons thus trained, of course, constituted a small fraction hardly deserving attention. Hey, we're going to continue the law. Alrighty. From literature, the African was excluded altogether. He was not supposed to have expressed any thought worth knowing. The philosophy in the African proverbs and in the rich folklore of that continent was ignored to give preference to the developed on the distant shores of the Mediterranean. Most missionary teachers of the freedmen, like most men of our time, had never read the interesting books of travel in Africa and had never heard of the Tariq-e-Sudan. Hi, how you doing, babe? In the teaching of fine arts, these instructors usually started with Greece by showing how that art was influenced from without. Ironically, I had African American literature in high school, and my teacher was Greek. His name was Mr. Calamanis. He was really great, and he made sure to make sure all of us were paying attention, but he was Greek, which is ironic. But they omitted the African influence, which scientists now regard as significant and dominant in early Hellas. They failed to teach the student the Mediterranean melting pot, with the Negroes from Africa bringing their wares, their ideas, and their blood therein to influence the history of Greece, Carthage, and Rome. Oh, you heard that? They just said, African bringing their wares, their ideas, and their blood therein to influence the history of Greece, Carthage, and Rome. But you know, they're never our ideas, right? Making desire father to the thought, our teachers either ignored these influences or endeavored to belittle them by working out theories to the contrary. The bias did not stop at this point, for it invaded the teaching of the professions. Negro law students were told that they belonged to the most criminal element in the country, and an effort was made to justify the procedure in the seats of injustice, where law was interpreted as being one thing for the white man and a different thing for the Negro. And we still see that in today's judicial system. But, you know. Anyway, in constitutional law, the spinelessness of the United States Supreme Court in permitting the judicial nullification of the 14th and 15th Amendment right was and still is boldly upheld in our few law schools. In medical schools, Negroes were likewise convinced of their inferiority and being reminded of their role as germ carriers. The prevalence of syphilis and tuberculosis among Negroes was especially emphasized, without showing that these maladies are more deadly among the Negroes for the reason that they are Caucasian diseases. And since these plagues are new to Negroes, these sufferers have not had time to develop against them the immunity which time has permitted the Caucasians. So, syphilis and tuberculosis are Caucasian diseases, which is why it's more damning to Negro life, because we have not had the time to adjust to such diseases, which naturally makes Caucasian people more dirty, more unhealthy than melanated people. But I have no such prejudice. I'm just telling you what the book is saying. Negroes, these sufferers, have not had time to develop against them in the immunity which has permitted it in the Caucasian. Other diseases to which Negroes easily fall prey were mentioned to point out the race as an undesirable element. When this condition was due to the Negro's economic and social status, little emphasis was placed upon the immunity of the Negro from diseases like yellow fever and influenza, which are so disastrous to whites. Yet the whites were not considered inferior because of this differential resistance to these plagues. In history, of course, the Negro had no place in this curriculum. He was pictured as a human being of the lower order, unable to subject passion to reason, and therefore useful only when the hewer of wood and the drawer of water for others. No thought was given to the history of Africa, except so far as it had been a field of exploitation for the Caucasian. You might study the history as it were offered in our system from the elementary school throughout the university, and you would never hear Africa mentioned except in the negative. You would never thereby learn that Africans first domesticated the sheep, goat, and cow, developed the idea of trial by jury, produced the first stringed instruments, and gave the world its greatest boon in the discovery of iron. Africa is the motherland. You would never know that prior to these Mohammedan invasion about 1000 AD, these natives in the heart of Africa had developed powerful kingdoms which were later organized as the Songhai Empire on the order of the Romans in the boasting of their similar grandeur. So the Romans didn't even build it themselves, they just took it from us. And this is text from 1933. Remind you. Unlike other people then, the Negro, according to this point of view, was an exception to the natural plan of things. He had no such mission as that of an outstanding contribution to culture. The status of the Negro then was justly fixed as that of an inferior. Teachers of Negroes in their first schools after emancipation did not proclaim any such doctrine, but the content of their curricula justified these inferences. An observer from outside of the situation naturally inquires why the Negroes, many of whom served their race as teachers, have not changed this program. These teachers, however, are powerless. Negroes have no control over their education and have little voice in their other affairs pertaining thereto. In a few cases, Negroes have been chosen as members of public boards of education, and some have been appointed members of private boards. But these Negroes are always such a small minority that they do not figure in the final working out of the educational program. So they literally put us in these seats to mock us, because they still don't give us enough power to actually make a change, even if they give us an opportunity to. Pay attention. The education of Negroes, then, the most important thing in the uplift of the Negroes is almost entirely in the hands of those who have enslaved them and now segregate them. With miseducated Negroes in control themselves, however, it is doubtful that the system would be very much different from what it is, or what it would rapidly undergo change. The Negroes thus placed in charge would be the products of the same system, and would show no more conception of the task at hand than do the whites, who have educated them and shaped their minds as they would have them function. Excuse me. Negro educators of today may have more sympathy and interest in the race than the whites now exploiting Negro institutions as educators, but the former have no more vision than their competitors. taught from books of the same bias, trained by Caucasians of the same prejudices, or by Negroes of enslaved minds, one generation of Negro teachers after another have served for no higher purpose than to do what they are told to do. In other words, a Negro teaching instructing Negro children is in many respects a white teacher thus engaged, for the program in each case is about the same. There can be no reasonable objection to the Negroes doing what the white man tells him to do, if the white man tells him to do what is right, but right is purely relative. The present system under the control of the whites trains the Negro to be white, and at the same time convinces him of the impropriety of the impossibility of his becoming white. It compels the Negro to become a good Negro, for the performance of which his education is ill-suited. For the white man's exploitation of the Negro through economic restriction and segregation, the present system is sound and will doubtless continue until this gives place to the saner policy of actual interracial cooperation, not the present farce of racial manipulation in which the Negro is a figurehead. History does not furnish a case of the elevation of people by ignoring the thought and aspiration of the people thus served. This is slightly dangerous ground here. However, for the Negro's mind has been all but perfectly enslaved, and that he has been trained to think what is desired of him. The highly educated Negroes do not like to hear anything uttered against this procedure because they make their living in this way, and they feel that they must defend the system. Few miseducated Negroes ever act otherwise, and if they so express themselves, they are easily crushed by the large majority to the contrary, so that the procession may move on without interruption. The result, then, is that the Negroes, thus miseducated, are of no service to themselves and none to the white man. The white man does not need the Negro's professional, commercial, or industrial assistance. What's up? It better not be the same person. Oh, my Jesus. They, I don't want to move your purse, but they in there. What is it? You gotta open it. What y'all doing? Oh. Hello, plus size. He asked for a small one. Look, I guess that's why he came back. I was like, what y'all doing? He said, I just need a small one. I get off in 2 minutes. But I gotta wait for my ride. Let me call him. Where was I at, y'all? History does not furnish a case of the elevation of a people by ignoring the thought and aspiration of the people thus served. This is slightly dangerous ground here. However, for the Negro's mind has all but perfectly enslaved in that he has been trained to think what is desired of him. Oh, no. Okay, so I read all that, right? Few miseducated Negroes ever act otherwise, and if they so express themselves, they are easily crushed by the large majority to the contrary, so that the procession may move on without interruption. The result, then, is that the Negroes thus miseducated are of no service to themselves and none to the white man. The white man does not need the Negro's professional, commercial, or industrial assistance, and as a result of the multiplication of mechanical appliances, he no longer needs them in drudgery or menial service. The highly educated Negroes, moreover, do not need the Negro professional or commercial classes because Negroes have been taught that whites can serve them more efficiently in these spheres. Reduced, then, to teaching and preaching, the Negroes will have no outlet but to go down a blind alley if the sort of education which they are now receiving is to enable them to find the way out of their present difficulties. Chapter 4. Education under outside control. In the new program of educating the Negro, what would become of the white teachers of the race? Someone recently inquired. This is a simple question requiring only a brief answer. The remaining few Christian workers who went south not so long after the Civil War and established schools and churches to lay the foundation on which we should now be building more wisely than we do, we would honor as a martyred throng. Anathema be upon him who would utter a word derogatory to the record of these heroes and heroines. We would pay high tribute also to unselfish Southerners like Haygood, Curry, Ruffner, Northern, and Vance, and to white men of our time, who believe that the only way to elevate people is to help them to help themselves. The unfortunate successors of the Northern missionary teachers of Negroes, however, have thoroughly demonstrated that they have no useful function in the life of the Negro. They have not the spirit of their predecessors and do not measure up to the requirements of educators desired in accredited colleges. If Negro institutions are to be as efficient as those for the whites in the South, I'm reading the Mis-Education of the Negro.
Don't put me on the freaking screen.
You can't see him, but that's my brother.
That's a violation of privacy.
That's my brother, y'all. He calling violation of privacy, but that's my brother. He ain't gonna sue me for real. Oh wait, he back there talking something. I'm gonna sue you. He lying. But anyway, if Negro institutions are to be as efficient as those for the whites in the South, the same high standard for the educators to direct them should be maintained. Negro schools cannot go forward within such a load of inefficiency, and especially when the white presidents of these institutions are often less scholarly than Negroes who have to serve under them. By law and custom, the white presidents and teachers of Negro schools are prevented from participating freely in the life of the Negro. They occupy, therefore, a most uncomfortable dual position. When the author once taught in a school with a mixed faculty, the white women connected with the institution would bow to him in patronizing fashion when on the campus, but elsewhere they did not see him. A white president of one Negro school never entertains a Negro in his home, preferring to shift such guests to the student's dining room. Another white president of a Negro college maintains on the campus a guest cottage which Negroes can enter only as servants. Still, another such functionary does not allow students to enter his home through the front door. Negroes trained under such conditions without protest become downright cowards and in life will continue as slaves in spite of their nominal emancipation. Which is what Kanye was talking about when he said slavery was a choice. Let's go back to that. I just uploaded a video on my profile where somebody gave you a more detailed explanation of that, I suppose. What different method of approach or what sort of appeal would one make to the Negro child that could not be made just as well by a white teacher?
You lucky these people up there don't know. I was about to say something mad ignorant.
Someone asked not long ago, to be frank, we must concede that there is no particular body of facts that Negro teachers can impart to children of their own race that may not be just as easily presented by persons of another race. If they have the same attitude as Negro teachers, but in most cases, tradition, race, hate, segregation, and terrorism make such a thing impossible. The only thing to do in this case, then, is to deal with the situation as it is. Yet, we should not take the position that a qualified Yet, we should not take the position that a qualified white person should not teach in a Negro school. For certain work which temporarily some whites may be able to do better than the Negroes, there is no objection to such service. But if the Negro is forced to live in the ghetto, he can more easily develop out of it under his own leadership than under that which is superimposed. The Negro will never be able to show all of his originality as long as his efforts are directed from without by those who socially prescribe him. Such friends will unconsciously keep him in the ghetto. Herein, however, the emphasis is not upon the necessity for separate systems, but upon the need for common sense schools and teachers who understand and continue in sympathy with those whom they instruct. Hello. I'll be out at 11:22 because I've been late all week. So don't be mad at me for being late. I'm sorry. Herein, however, the emphasis is not upon the necessity for separate systems, but upon the need for common sense schools and teachers who understand and continue in sympathy with those whom they instruct. Those who take the position to the contrary have the idea that education is merely a process of imparting information. One who can give out these things or devise an easy plan for doing so then is an educator. In a sense, this is true, but it accounts for most of the troubles of the Negro. Real education means to inspire people to live more abundantly, to learn to begin with life as they find it and make it better. But the instruction so far given Negroes in colleges and universities has worked to the contrary. In most cases, such graduates have merely increased the number of malcontents who offer no program for changing the undesirable conditions about which they complain. One should rely upon protest only when it is supported by a constructive program. Unfortunately, Negroes who think as the author does and dare express themselves are branded as opponents of interracial cooperation. As a matter of fact, however, such Negroes are the real workers in carrying out a program of interracial effort. Cooperation implies equality of the participants in the particular task at hand. On the contrary, however, the usual way now is for the whites to work out their plans behind closed doors, have them approved by a few Negroes serving nominally on the board, and then employ a white or mixed staff to carry out their program. This is not interracial cooperation. It is merely the ancient idea of calling upon the inferior to carry out the orders of the superior. To express it in post-classic language, as did Jesse O. Thomas, the Negroes do the coing and the whites the operating. This unsound attitude of the friends of the Negro is due to the persistence of the medieval idea of controlling underprivileged classes. Behind closed doors, these friends say you need to be careful in advancing Negroes to commanding positions unless it can be determined beforehand that they will do what they are told to do. You can never tell when some Negroes will break out and embarrass their friends. After being advanced to positions of influence, some of them have been known to run amok and advocate social equality or demand for their race the privileges of democracy when they should restrict themselves to education and religious development. It is often said, too, that this time is not ripe for Negroes to take over the administration of their institutions, for they do not have the contacts for raising money. But what becomes of this argument when we remember what Booker T. Washington did for Tuskegee and observe what R.R. Martin and John Hope are doing today? As the first Negro president of Howard University, Mordecai W. Johnson has raised more money for that institution among philanthropists than all of its former presidents combined. Furthermore, if after 3 generations the Negro colleges have not produced men qualified to administer their affairs, such an administration is an eloquent argument that they have failed ingloriously and should be immediately closed. Recently, someone asked me how I connect. Recently, someone asked me how I connect my criticism of the higher education of the Negroes with new developments in this sphere, and especially with the 4 universities in the South, which are to be made possible by the millions obtained from governments, boards, and philanthropists. I believe that the establishment of these 4 centers of learning at Washington, Atlanta, Nashville, and New Orleans can be so carried out to mark an epoch in the development of the Negro race, which is actually really crazy because I was looking into studying the Egyptian language, and Washington, Atlanta, Nashville, and New Orleans were some of the schools that were listed, like some of the only schools that were listed. Now, you remember how, if you've been following me the whole time, earlier in my live, it said out of hundreds of schools, only 18 actually offer a substantial program for African Americans or melanated people, colored people, to truly learn their real history and their culture and what it is that we actually come from. But back to the story. On the other hand, there is just as much possibility for a colossal failure of the whole scheme. If these institutions are to be the replica of universities like Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and Chicago, if the men who are to administer them and teach in them are to be the products of roll-top desk theorists who have never touched the life of a Negro, the money thus invested will be just as profitably spent if it is used to buy peanuts to throw an animal in a circus. Some of the thought behind the new educational movement is to provide in the South for educating the Negroes who are now crowding northern universities, especially the medical schools, many of which will not admit Negroes because of the racial friction in hospital practice. In the rush to merely make special provisions for these undesirable students, however, the institutions which are to train them may be established on false ideas and make the same blunders of the smaller institutions which have preceded them. It will hardly help a poisoned patient to give him a large dose of poison. In higher institutions for Negroes, organized along lines required for people differently circumstanced, some few may profit from being further grounded in the fundamentals, others may be more adept in the exploitation of their people, and a smaller number may cross the divide and join the whites in useful service. But the large majority of the products of such institutions will increase rather than diminish the load which the masses have had to carry ever since their emancipation. Such ill-prepared workers will have no foundation upon which to build. The education of any people should begin with the people themselves, but Negroes thus trained have been dreaming about the ancients of Europe and about those who have tried to imitate them. In a course at Harvard, for example, students were required to find out whether Pericles was justly charged with trying to supplant the worship of Jupiter with that of Juno. Since that time, Negroes thus engaged have learned that they would have been much better prepared for work among the Negroes in the Black Belt if they'd spent that time learning why John Jasper of Sun Du Move fame joined with Joshua in contending that the planet stood still in the middle of the line while he fought in the battle the second time. Talking the other day with one of the men, now given the millions to build the 4 Negro universities in the South. However, I find that he is of the opinion that accredited institutions can be established in mushroom fashion with theorists out of touch with the people. In other words, you can go almost anywhere and build a $3 million plant, place in charge a white man to do what you want accomplished, and in a short while he can secure or have trained to order the men necessary to make a university. We want here, he will say, a man who has his master's degree in English. Send me another who has his doctor's degree in sociology, and I can use one more in physics. Now, experience has shown that men of this type may fill in, but a university cannot be established with such raw recruits. The author once had some experience in trying to man a college in this fashion, and the result was a story that would make an interesting headline for the newspapers. When Dr. William Rainey Harper was establishing the University of Chicago, he called to the headship. That's another one of the schools that will teach you in Egypt and hieroglyphs and all of that good things. Chicago, he called to the headship of the various departments only men who had distinguished themselves in the creative world. Some advanced degrees and some had not. Several of them had never done any formal graduate work at all. All of them, however, were men who thought was moving in the world. It may be argued that the Negroes have no such men and must have them trained, but such a thing cannot be forced as we are now doing it. It would be much better to stimulate the development of the more progressive teachers of old than experiment with novices produced by the degradation of higher education. The degradation of the doctorate especially dawned upon the author the other day more clearly than ever when a friend of his rushed into his office saying, "I have been trying to see you for several days. I have just failed to get a job for which I have been working, and I am told that I cannot expect a promotion until I get my doctor's degree." Doctor's degree? Oh. It literally put in like their improper grammar, and I could not pronounce that. I am so sorry, y'all. But he's talking about his doctorate's degree. That is what he called it. He could not even pronounce the words, but he is determined to have his doctor's degree to get the job in sight. This shameful status of higher education is due in a large measure to low standards of institutions with a tendency towards the diplomal procedure. To get a job or to hold one, you go in and stay until they grind you out a doctor's degree, and you do not have to worry any further. The assumption is that almost any school will be glad to have you there after, and you will receive a large salary. Investigation has shown, however, that men who have the doctorate not only lose touch with the common people, but they do not do as much creative work as those of less formal education. After having this honor conferred upon them, these so-called scholars often rest on their oars.
No, not you.
Few persons have thought of the seriousness of such inertia among men who are put in the lead of things because of meeting statutory requirements of frontier universities which are not on the frontier. The General Education Board and the Julius Rosenwald Fund have a policy which may be a partial solution of the undeveloped Negro college instructor problems. These foundations are giving Negro teachers scholarships to improve themselves for work in a sphere in which they are now laboring in the South. These boards, as a rule, do not send one to school to work for the doctor's degree. If they find a man of experience and good judgment showing possibilities for growth, they will provide for him to study a year or more to refresh his mind with whatever there is new in his field. Experience has shown that teachers thus helped have later done much better work than doctors of philosophy made to order. The northern universities, moreover, cannot do graduate work for the Negroes along certain lines when they are concentrating on the educational needs of people otherwise circumstanced. I'm about to go, y'all. I got 6 minutes left. I'll be back tomorrow, though. The graduate school for the Negroes studying chemistry is the George W. Carver. If I'm not mistaken, he's the one who did the peanut butter, all that good stuff at Tuskegee. At least 100 youths should wait daily upon the words of this scientist to be able to pass on the generations unborn his great knowledge of agricultural chemistry. Yep, so I was right. Ooh. Negroes desiring to specialize in agriculture should do it with workers like T.M. Campbell and B.F. Hubert. Among the Negro farmers of the South, in education itself, the situation is the same. Neither Columbia nor Chicago can give an advanced course in Negro rural education, for their work in education is based primarily upon what they know of the educational needs of the white. Such work for Negroes must be done under the direction of the trailblazers who are building schools, houses, and reconstructing the educational program of those in the backwoods. Leaders of this type can supply the foundation upon which a university of realistic education may be established. We offer no argument here against earning advanced degrees, but these should come as honors conferred for training crowned with scholastic distinction, not to enable a man to increase his salary or find a better paying position. The schools which are now directing attention exclusively to these external marks of learning will not contribute much to the uplift of the Negro. Basically, if you're doing it strictly for money, you're not going to profit as much as you are if you're doing it for knowledge. In Cleveland, not long ago, the author found at the Western Reserve University something unusually encouraging. A native of Mississippi, a white man trained in a northern university and now serving as a professor in one, has under him in sociology a Negro student from Georgia. For his dissertation, this Negro is collecting the sayings of his people in everyday life. Their morning greetings, their remarks about the weather, their comments on things which happen around them, their reaction to things which strike them as unusual, and their efforts to interpret life as the paranormal passes before them. This white Mississippian and black Georgian are on the right way to understand the Negro, and if they do not fall out about social equality, they will serve the Negro much better than those who are trying to find out whether Henry VIII lusted more than Anne Boleyn than after Catherine of Aragon, or whether Elizabeth was justly styled as more untruthful than Philip II of Spain. Chapter 5. Let's see if I can finish chapter 5. Nope. We'll finish what we can within the next 3 minutes. The failure to learn to make a living. The greatest indictment of such education as Negroes have received, however, is that they have thereby learned little as to making a living, the first essential in civilization. Rural Negroes have always known something about agriculture, and in a country where land is abundant, they have been able to make some sort of living on the soil. Even though they have not always employed scientific methods of farming, an industry where the competition is keener, however, what the Negro has learned in school has had little bearing on the situation, as pointed out above. In business, the role of education as a factor in the uplift of the Negro has been still less significant. The Negroes of today are unable to employ one another, and the whites are inclined to call on Negroes only when workers of their own race have been taken care of. For the solution of this problem, the miseducated Negro has offered no remedy whatsoever. What Negroes are now being taught does not bring their minds into harmony with life as they must face it. When a Negro student works his way through college by polishing shoes, He does not think of making a special study of the science underlying the production and distribution of leather and its products that he may someday figure in this sphere. The Negro boy sent to college by a mechanic seldom dreams of learning mechanical engineering to build upon the foundation his father has laid, that in years to come he may figure as a contractor or a consulting engineer. The Negro girl who goes to college hardly wants to return to her mother if she is a washerwoman, but this girl should come back with sufficient knowledge of physics and chemistry and business administration to use her mother's work as a nucleus for a modern steam laundry. A white professor of a university recently resigned his position to become rich by running a laundry for Negroes in a southern city. A Negro college instructor would have considered such a suggestion an insult. The so-called education of Negro college graduates leads them to throw away opportunities which they have, and to go in quest of those which they do not find. In the case of the white youth in this country, they can choose their courses more at random and still succeed because of numerous opportunities offered by their people. But even they show much more wisdom than do Negroes. For example, a year or two after the author left Harvard, he found out West, a schoolmate who was studying wool. How did you happen to go into this sort of thing? Oh, I got 1 minute. The author inquired. His people, the former, replied, and had some experience in wool, and in college he prepared for this work. On the contrary, the author studied Aristotle, Plato, Marsilio, and Padua, and Pascius Rathburdus when he was in college. His friend who studied wool, however, is now independently rich and has sufficient leisure to enjoy the cultural side of life which his knowledge of science underlying his business developed. But the author has to make his living by begging for a struggling cause. Alrighty. We got like 8 pages left. I'll be right back. Gonna take a break. Bye, guys.